Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I'm so excited to introduce you to our guest. Before I do that, here's a quote just for this episode. The purpose of management, leadership, parenting, or governing, any form of organizational leadership, is to solve today's problems and get ready to deal with tomorrow's problems. And that means managing change. Ishak Calderon Adizes. Our guest today has been managing change in their tenured, decades long career, helping companies from the inside and the outside. They're a friend of one of our friends of the Culture Matters podcast, the one and only Alan Whitman. They started their career in leadership management, the human resource, working inside of companies like Bond, like Constellation Energy, and with some of the greatest consulting management firms that you've heard of around the world. They've authored books and participated in Shock Proof and the Management Handbook. I think I actually messed. Let me say that right. Yeah, the Talent Management Handbook. I'm a little nervous here. And our guest today, Juan Pablo Gonzalez. Thank you so much for coming. Senior partner at Kinavic, a firm that helps firms, the advisors of the advisors, working throughout the United States and beyond on helping companies work through the challenges of partner evolution, leadership, and growth. Thanks for coming on the Culture Matters podcast.
Hey Jay, thanks so much for having me this morning. It's terrific to spend some time together.
Now, did you when you were studying, you did industrial labor in school? That was your background, labor relations or in industrial education?
It's in industrial and labor relations. Curiously, most people who do what I do have gotten there through various means. I didn't know that this is what I was going to do for a living, but my academic background is exactly what it needs to be for what I do. Industrial and labor relations is basically the study of work and how
Wow.
people interact in the workplace.
The study of work and how people interact in the workplace. How long has that been something that has been studied?
So the program I went through at Cornell was founded in the 1960s. It was the first of its kind. It has its roots in organizational psychology and industrial psychology, but as the labor movement grew, there were a group of people who said, there's something to this. And as the name states, industrial and labor relations, the history of the school was more about how the labor movement engaged with management. The work that I've done and the way the school has evolved, it really is about the study of work. And look, you learn about compensation, organizational behavior. You learn some labor history, labor economics, and all of this, I think, prepares. And I'm a big fan of the school, as you can tell. Really prepares the students to work in the workplace, to understand how people engage, and to help people work more effectively, whether they are shop floor employees, uh, you know, service employees, white collar professionals, bankers, you name it. Everyone who works, or almost everyone who works with someone else, right? They have peers, they have bosses, they have customers, they have subordinates. So the application of organizational behavior, organizational psychology, understanding human dynamics, understanding motivation is really critical, I've found, to understanding the workplace and what goes on in it. It's what I've always been interested in.
Wow. It has this what do you think this is becoming more and more important to take notice of in the recent years than ever, or is it more of the same thing?
Well, work is changing so much, so I think it's more relevant now than it's ever been. A couple of years ago, people started talking about the future of work. Every day you flip open the paper, you read the news, and there's something about AI. So work is changing radically, right? How people engage is changing radically. 5 years ago, we, generally speaking, hopped into our cars or got on a train or on a bus and went and worked with people in a place. And then you were done working, you'd come home. Well, that doesn't happen that much anymore. So just think of that as what that does to the relationship between employer and employee, and to the relationships that people have within an organization. I've had colleagues that I didn't meet for 3 years because we met on video calls, did work on video calls, collaborated. when I started working, quite a while ago, that was unimaginable.
Yeah, what does it do? What are some of the manifestations of motivation when people are together versus people are not together?
So, I mean, there are academics certainly studying this extensively, but I'll say anecdotally,
Yeah, yeah.
the dynamics are that people build relationships more quickly. They do so because they get to know each other in greater dimension. I mean, not just because it's not a flat screen, but it is, you walk into the meeting, hey Jay, how's it going? We'll grab a cup of coffee. What's going on in your life? How was your weekend? How's the dog? Are the kids? Whatever. And there's more. You get to know the people more completely, and so by knowing them more completely, you build relationships more quickly. Number one, and that leads to better trust. If you have a strong relationship and better trust, you're typically able to operate more effectively. Now, I might get, we might get to know each other and you might hate me. And so that would be detrimental. But if we get to know each other and understand where we're each coming from, like, yeah, Jay, you look kind of tired today. What's going on? Oh, my dog was sick, and it's not like you're spending a ton of time on that, but it's the bumper time between the beginning of the meeting, the grabbing of the coffee, the end of the meeting, versus what I would call sort of the tyranny of video conferencing, which is 30 minutes, 30 minutes, 30 minutes, no break. So you come onto the call, you maybe exchange pleasantries for a minute, then you got some
Mhm.
things to do, and then somebody's got a hard stop. And so you're going from working together to transacting. And I think that's a big change.
Uh, is that phenomenon a component of, in your estimation, part of what's creating pressure on organizations around elevating their partners? Because there's this there seems to be a tension between the mentor mentee, the apprentice, and the senior leader. That relationship, the senior leader helping the mentee learn the business, and the mentee helping the senior leader get their business. You think there's that part of that tension is this integration of the technological aspect?
I think there's a big part of that. So, I mean, you mentioned partners and mentees here. We're speaking about professional services. So, law firms, accounting firms, consulting firms. And that's been largely what I've done for the past 20 years or so, either worked in a consulting firm or had consulting firms as my clients, or in many cases, both. So, the way I learned this business was through some spectacular mentors, senior partners who staffed me onto their teams. And it wasn't just out of the kindness of their hearts. I mean, there was work to be done. I did the work. But what we did back then is there was a fair amount of travel involved. So there's travel now, it's coming back. But back then the job was you get up, you go to the pitch with the partner, you come back, you write the proposal, you present it, you go to the client, you do the work, you come back. Well, all that back and forth, windshield time, airport time. I mean, that's what we refer to. We would interview candidates for like, how do you feel about riding in a car with this person for 90 minutes? How do you feel about missing a flight and being at the airport with this person? And so, even though we were remote workers, if you will, we didn't go into the office much. We went to client sites. We were always together. And so that builds a different kind of understanding between people of different levels. I'll tell you, every single senior partner that I know, if you were to ask them,
Hmm.
about their career and how they made it, what it was, how they learned what happened. They'll take you back to a story that'll be before they were a partner, probably when they were staff, and they'll tell you about the person who mentored them, whether it was somebody immediately above them, a project manager, or a partner, and what they did, what mistakes they made, and how the person helped them learn from it. So there's, at least in this profession, there's a long history of learning from people ahead of you, and it's symbiotic because they need the work to be completed and completed well. You need to learn. If you learn, you advance, and one day you become a partner. So that
Hmm.
cycle of apprenticeship, I won't say it's broken, but it's different now. It's different because people spend less time together. The larger, generally larger, but certainly the more well-funded firms or firms that are willing to invest in it pick up on this by creating other opportunities. So they will have, in-office events, learning events, social events, go to a ball game kind of things, or the really big firms have their own
Hmm.
universities. If you think the big four all have a fill in the blank university where people go, and that's where they build culture, right? That's what you do in the remote world. Now, what I'll say about that is that during COVID, a lot of this stuff was scaled back, and so there's a bit of a gap. There are people who went through that and then stop but had already built the relationships. There are people who joined firms during the pandemic, and it's an interesting cohort because they didn't quite know how to do this. And then the people who are coming in after the pandemic who get to hear all the old stories.
When you were explaining that mentor-mentee dichotomy, I'm thinking someone that's on the upward trajectory of a firm right now or has that aspiration could be listening to this podcast and you become that, but from afar.
Mm-hmm.
Curious of your thoughts on that, like a thought experiment, or say, like if I'm at a firm and in that lag time, I'm listening to this podcast. I'm listening to you. You become that what patriarch
Mm-hmm.
to that person, but virtually. They don't have a relationship with you. They only they might feel as though they do because they're in control of that relationship, listening to this, right? They're seeking the
Right,
information through this technology, but they don't actually get to know you like you and me. We're not at lunch together
right.
having this conversation just between the two of us. It's you and me and the world and
Mm-hmm.
someone out there potentially listening to this, trying to learn from your career. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. That was just a thought that came to mind when you were sharing that about the mentor and the mentee in physically together, right? Spending that time in the car or spending that time in transportation, going to a client. If I'm the mentee, I'm not, and now I'm at void of that. Maybe I'm more likely to go to the podcast or go to the internet or go to some other source to get that information, to get that mentorship, to get that
Mm-hmm.
academic. Curious of what you think about.
Well, with a caveat, and again, looking at your shirt, the caveat being that culture matters, right? The caveat being that context is different in different firms. It's not a monolith. Um,
Mm.
I'd say this. One, the best thing to do is to learn from people that you are working with because you can come out of a meeting and say, "Hey, Jay, how'd I do?" And you would say, "Well, Juan, you did this well and this well. You could have done something else here. You were a little long-winded there. Speak up when you open the section, et cetera, et cetera." And that in the moment feedback is immensely valuable. Now, if that's, that notwithstanding, what you've described, the sort of the remote mentoring, if you will, on a broad basis, is performance coaching. We do that all the time. We do that with partners in particular. So if you know the industry and you know the context, and let's just play at the thought experiment because this is an industry I know well, the context I know well, and say that you are someone who is a partner candidate, and I'll just lay out how I would do this. I mean, the first thing I would want to do, since we don't work together, is to get to know you. We'd spend some time understanding your life in 360 degrees, what's important to you, your values, your history, your biography, right? Next thing we would do is conduct some psychometric assessment. So a personality test, if you will. Really, really valuable.
Oh, I
Kinavic,
could tell you mine. You want to hear them? I'm just kidding. No,
yeah, at
I know all
Kinavic,
of them.
we partner with Hogan Assessments, which is the most widely used assessment product in the world. We have a competency model called Verity that's back tested for professional services. So you're a partner candidate. I am now your performance coach. You've taken the assessment. We've learned what your strengths are. We've learned what your gaps are, and we know that you are someone who has strong executive presence, but for argument's sake has issues building trust. Um, and we start with that. And so, okay, let's understand how that works. Let's talk about your assignments. What are you working on right now? Oh, I've got a couple presentations coming up. I've got a client pitch, and we would help you prepare. I would help you prepare, and because I would understand where you're coming from, what causes you anxiety, what your stress behaviors are. The trust issue might manifest, and we'd say, well, so part of your hurdle when you're working with a new audience is that you don't trust that they're going to believe in your background because you don't trust people, so you expect that they don't trust you. So you might overcompensate. I'm making this up, but like you might overcompensate and say, well, I don't trust that these guys know what they're talking about. They don't trust me. So I'm going to talk a lot about me and why they should trust me. And that's ineffective. If you're as a consultant, your superpower, if you're good at this, is you ask really good questions. It's not that you talk a lot. This example of me notwithstanding, the key is really understanding what problem you're trying to solve and asking questions to better understand. There are people who are really bright who come into this industry who want to show you that they're really bright. They don't ask questions, they talk too much, and generally speaking, they're less successful as consultants. They might work out fine as a junior staff person, but they don't do well with a client. So that's an example of how, without working together, someone like me could help someone improve their performance and their odds of advancement to partner.
When you were with, am I pronouncing this correctly, Bon?
Yeah, Bon, it was a Dutch software company, ERP, early ERP provider.
How did you prepare and execute because it seemed to be a large, like the largest in the company's history, severance, uh, to cut costs and kind of it looked like restructure the organization. How did you prepare and execute for that?
That was an interesting experience. I was the head of total rewards at this company for the Americas. So I was responsible for compensation, benefits, HR information systems, a number of different things that became very important because we were highly acquisitive. This is late 90s, basically, the tech boom. And we were buying quite a few companies. And so the front end of it was, how do we integrate these new companies into our company? How do we make sure that people get paid and are paid equitably between the acquiring company and the acquired company? Because no one's the same. Somebody's got richer benefits, somebody's got a better bonus program, someone's got a better 401k program. So harmonizing those sorts of things was really important. Making sure that we create one company was really important, one set of metrics. That's the growth stage. Now remember, it's a tech boom. So it went up, went down. So the back end of it was saying, okay, now I wasn't involved in determining whose position was being eliminated. But once we had a sense for how much our savings target was, my team would then figure out, okay, how are we going to do this? If we need to take X million dollars out, and the division heads are going to pick their people, but we know that we're going to reduce. The last one I did was a 10% reduction in the workforce, and this is after buying 14 companies in a year, so it was a real roller coaster.
Wow.
The work that we did there was to determine, okay, once you know who's going to go, how do we address this? What kind of severance are they going to get? This is when severance is more common. What can we afford to do? How do we integrate it with unemployment? We provided outplacement support. This is again, earlier days, so larger companies would hire a coach to help you, write your resume. They didn't have ChatGPT back then, so they'd hire you work with someone to develop a job search strategy. So selecting the consulting firm that would help us with outplacement was really important. And then I'll be honest with you, the hardest part of the job, at least for me, was once we had this program written up, getting on a plane and flying around the country with a bunch of executives to meet with people, because we used to do this in person, to meet with
Wow.
people and tell them that they're out of a job. So if you ever saw the movie Up in the Air with George
Yes.
Clooney, it was a lot like that. There was usually a senior executive and me. I'm the guy who shows up, who knows how the program is designed, the severance program, because I designed it. I'm also there to essentially keep the leader from saying things that he or she should not say and committing the firm to things that are outside the severance policy. But the real tough part, the real personal and heartbreaking part, was really literally flying into cities, meeting people for the first time, and the meeting being to let them know that they were being let go. I mean, it was, you
How
saw
do
all
you do
sorts.
that in a way that, because that's, I think, very helpful to our audience today. How do you do that in a way that uplifts or empowers or lowers the likelihood of shame or
Well,
in your experience from, whether it's Abraham Lincoln learning what not to do or what did you draw from that? What wisdom?
Well, I think you have to put yourself in the other person's shoes to start with and say, okay,
Mm.
how would it feel for me? How would I like this to be done? Let's take off the table. What I'd like is for this not to happen. Okay, so if someone this is you're going through this, you want to be treated with respect and dignity, which we did. You want to be calm. You want to be in my role, be well prepared to answer any questions because this is, pulling the plug on someone's career. There's tremendous uncertainty. We can't provide certainty in exchange, but we can provide certainty on some things. I can help you to understand that your your employment terminates immediately, or you have till the end of the week, or what have you. Here's the timeline. Here is the severance that's being offered to you. Here's how much, what period of time, what healthcare benefits. It becomes technical very quickly, and then what you need to do in order to avail yourself of these benefits. So there's usually a release involved. We walk through the release, which effectively releases the company from liability in exchange for the severance that's being offered. So part of it is a little legalistic, but it really is just trying to provide some clarity in a calm environment where you answer the person's questions respectfully. Um, and look, I saw all sorts of reactions. There were people who showed up with a banker's box with their stuff already packed. They said, I heard about this meeting. I know what this is about. Can we just do this? We had people who became quite emotional. It was, issues about it not being fair, they're being singled out. That's really more of a question for the senior leader who made the selection, and usually they do it well. They're compassionate, but not overly explanatory. They're explaining, here's what happened. The company's in a situation. We had to eliminate a certain number of positions, and unfortunately, yours was one of them. This is not performance based. It is a large job action. So you explain that through, but the minimum number of cases where we had to do that. The worst were the people who would hide, frankly, who knew it was coming and like wouldn't show up for the meeting. And we quickly learned that you need to be able to shut down internal communications very quickly, pull emails and et cetera, because we did have some bad actors who they weren't stealing things, but they were in an emotional state and making statements that they and the company would later regret. So part of this is also the preparation on the back end. If you've done this a few times, and unfortunately I have, you understand that there's certain security that needs to be maintained. You want to protect customer information, et cetera. So you work with
Mm.
IT, you make sure that the back end of it is taken care of, meet with the employee, explain to them what's happening, what the consequences are, that they have a certain period of time to review the documentation with an attorney. That we recommend if they have any questions, they ask us about how the program works, but if they're debating whether or not to sign it, they seek outside counsel. Because what any organization wants is to support people, not just when they're employees, but as they leave, to treat them with dignity and respect, to have them, years later say, you know what, the company had some trouble, it didn't work out. It's unfortunate that I lost my job, but they treated me well, and I'm at peace with it.
Why is that important?
Well, I mean, one, I think as humans, I mean, frankly, you want to treat people well and you want them to feel well treated. Two is the company reputation. There are companies, and look, you've seen the same news items I have. The companies that do a mass layoff on a Zoom call. I mean, it's not it's in work is a human endeavor, right? We're people working together with people. So my belief, you got to treat people as humans. So, just simply getting 1,000 people on a webcast and saying, if you're on this webcast, you're out of work, and you'll receive an email, sign it, and send it back, doesn't give people, I think, sufficient dignity. I mean, if you've been working for an organization for a while, spending most of your day contributing, I think fair is fair. You should be respected, on your way out as well.
Many of our listeners are not either aware of, they haven't yet experienced being partnered or invested in working with a professional firm of any sort. So as small businesses listen to the
Mhm.
show as well. Why, what, what is a consultant in your estimate? Because that's a broad terminology. Or like, what is that, and why is that important to a small business?
Well, a consultant's essentially an external advisor, right? I mean, you can have all sorts of different consultants. I I know people who are residential real estate brokers who describe themselves as consultants. I'm like, well, that's interesting. Tell me about this. What they'll say is, look, I have expertise that I provide as a service to people who pay me for it. And that's sort of it, right? I mean, a doctor is a consultant. A doctor is an expert who gathers data about your health and based on their experience and expertise provides you advice to address a challenge, right? My stomach hurts. What's going on here? Well, we're going to do some scans. I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm going to figure out that it's your diet or that it's something more serious. I'm either going to recommend a change in your lifestyle. I'm going to recommend some medication. Okay. I'm a human capital consultant. So you have a problem in your firm, or you think you do, and the problem that you have is one of senior partners in your firm are having difficulty adapting to change, and that change is driven by the fact that you're now highly acquisitive. You've taken on some private equity investments, you're buying new firms, and now as a partner who grew up in the firm, I've got a bunch of new partners who I didn't grow up with, who come from different firms, but say that they're just as good at accounting as I am. Okay, so now you've come to me, you've come to my doctor's office, you've explained the challenge that you're facing, and so my job is now to gather information to understand the root cause of this challenge and then apply my experience and expertise to advise you on how to address it. It's like, okay, well, so what do we know about the legacy partners? What do we know about the new partners empirically? Let's talk to them and let's understand what their experience is. Oh, I clawed my way up to partner here after 20 years, and I know how this place works. And now you're bringing in these people who I don't know and I don't trust. Okay, start to understand that you've got some legacy issues. You've just increased my target numbers you've tripled them because the private equity investor wants higher performance. Okay, so now I take my experience and my expertise and start to understand how we can help these partners accelerate their performance. Okay, well, it turns out now that you're on a bigger platform, you can no longer just keep going back to the same clients. We're going to need to work on getting you out in the market more, or we need to develop some new services, or if you take Jay's practice and Juan's practice and put them together, 1 + 1 is actually going to make 3 because what you do is complementary to what I do. My clients don't know you, your clients don't know me. So we then develop, I would then recommend a strategy that figures out how we work together to cross sell. So a consultant, again, this is a long answer, but a consultant is an external advisor who applies their experience and expertise to help their client address a problem that they're unable to address satisfactorily on their own.
As the um, capital, as more private capital goes into the main street, is that like as more private capital goes into Main Street, is that creating more opportunity for the third party helpers?
I think so. And here's why. Think of yourself as an individual investor in anything. You want to put money into a pizza place. You want to put money into Nvidia. You put that money in with the expectation that you're going to make more money than you invested, right? That's what an investor does. And typically, if you're like anyone else, you would like to make that money as quickly as possible, right? You don't put in $1,000 and say, I'm happy to have it be $10,000 in 30 years. No, you'd be happier if it were in 30 days, right? So what that does is it really amps up the performance pressure on the firms that receive the capital. Because I've actually put this on a post the other day. This is a story a friend of mine told me years ago. He had some experience with private equity. He said, these guys are great. They show up with a big bag of money and it's fantastic. Best day of your life. So then a week later, they show up with a big bag of conditions. Here's what they want you to do. They've just invested in you. You now have the money, but you also now are accountable for delivering returns on that money. So you can't just keep doing the same thing at the same pace. Otherwise, what would why would they have invested in you? The value creation thesis is, generally speaking, I'm going to invest in you because there's either opportunity for you to become more efficient or to grow or both, right? So I'm going to give you a bag of money, and my conditions are you reduce your days of sales outstanding by X. You improve your profitability, your margin by Y. You use this technology to get more work done with fewer people, and so we make more money.
What, in your experience, what types of tensions can arise in those types of scenarios that have to be that it would help to have someone like yourself or teams like yourself to work with that to alleviate that? Because I was listening to your example earlier about new people coming in and the more tenured senior people, that creating pressure, relational pressure. You talked about how work is about humans, right? Work, people working together. So what type of tensions or would you see could arise?
Well, there are a few that we see commonly. One is the performance tension that I mentioned. So you've been doing your job, you've been doing it well for a while, and suddenly the numbers go up, the metrics go up, the standards go up, right? You need to now sell more. You need to run bigger engagements. You need to be more profitable. You need to learn how to represent new services. That's a lot of pressure, especially for someone in a partner role who maybe is in a lifestyle now where they've paid their dues, right? And so they're going to spend the last 10 years working with their clients, delivering good service, making enough money with the right margin and good quality, and sort of caretaking that account. So the job changes dramatically when somebody comes in and says you have to deliver at a higher level. You need higher revenues, you need more service lines, you need to introduce people. So that's one challenge that people face when they take on this kind of investment. I think the other challenge that you'll start to see is frankly, the differences between what the investors expect and what the partners know. Because an investor makes a deal to invest in a professional services firm, they make that deal in conversation with the executive leadership team of the firm, right? The CEO and their leadership team are usually the folks who come up with the deal. It's not they don't go out and talk to every partner, but value creation is the role of everyone else. Not to knock the leaders, but the leaders don't work with clients. The leaders don't sell work. The leaders don't lead teams. They're the executive leadership of the company. They've made the deal, and the people who have to deliver on the deal had nothing to do with the deal. So there's a big translation that needs to take place, and some firms do it
Mm.
better than others. But to explain to the partners, listen, hey, we just did this deal. We now have an extra $1 billion. We have $1 billion we didn't used to have. And what that's going to mean is we are going to be acquiring some firms. We're going to have some new colleagues. We're going to be in new geographies. So here's the upside is we have investment capital. Jay, we always wanted to open that office in Chicago. We can never quite get it going. Now we can. Or we're going to buy a firm in Minneapolis because we've always thought that that's a good market. We're tired of flying back and forth. So here's the upside. But then the flip side of it is going to be Jay, we want you to run the Minneapolis market out from Chicago. And it's an important objective, and you need to figure out how to do it and let us know what resources you need. So your job changes pretty dramatically. You can see it as a positive. I'd say, well, this is a growing firm. This is terrific. My equity stake becomes more valuable. I get to do new things. Or you could look at it as a negative and say, I've been doing this for 30 years. I thought I'd do it for another 5 or 6 and then peacefully retire.
Mm.
Those folks, it's hard on them. I mean, the idea of the capital is terrific, and in a lot of cases, it funds pensions and does a lot of things like that. But it does not come without its requirements. I mean, why would it, right?
Is the private capital, because you mentioned your focus has been accounting, professional service, like consulting, legal.
Mm-hmm.
Is the private capital investing into those verticals?
It's a massive space right now. I got to tell you, I read an article probably at least every week. I hear of at least one or two firms taking on private equity capital in the professional services space. So top 20 accounting firms are, I mean, I'm not going to go start rattling through the names, but I mean, I think this year alone, there's probably been 5 or 6 high profile deals, big ones. I mean, there's one consulting firm. I live in Northern Virginia, one that was invested in years ago, maybe yeah, 3 years ago. I think the firm had a value, I want to say, of $600 million, and another firm came in and bought it for $1 billion. right? So this is like real, this is real money.
Wow.
There's another firm, a mid-sized CPA firm, same thing 2 years ago, took on private equity investment for the first time, valuation in the about 450 million, sold this past month for 2 billion. I mean, the scale is dramatic, and PE likes professional services because they typically come with backlog, right? So there's some recurring revenue. CPA firms in particular, people and companies have tax and accounting needs that are there every year. You don't have to demonstrate that you need to do your taxes. So there's recurring revenue, and there's often, an opportunity to create greater efficiency, whether it's through scale, through buying other firms, or by investing in technology. So it's a very, very active space, and it's accelerating. I'd say a year and a half ago was rare. A year ago, you started to see more of it. Now, I mean, I'm seriously, I'm talking to 4 or 5 firms about this exact issue, and they're not the giant CPA firms; they're the mid-tier ones. The other side of this phenomenon is the acquisitive nature of the big firms. The big four, I don't know if people realize this, the big four acquire firms constantly. So it's M&A activity, but it feels the same way. We have our 100-person firm, and then we do good work and somebody hears about it, and we get a call from a firm that is 30 billion in revenue, 300,000 employees, and they'd like to buy Jay and Juan's practice because they've always wanted to be in St. Louis, or they love what we're doing with cyber or something, and they make us an offer, and we go from having our own firm to being partners in a giant firm. We've made some money, but it's the same effect, right? As people in the firm, you and I as leaders now have to help the people who are on our teams understand what it's like to go from being in a 100-person firm where Jay and Juan know everyone to being in a 300,000-person firm where, you know, you'll never meet all your colleagues. You'll probably never develop a relationship with the managing partner or the CEO. So I mean, there's a lot of activity in this industry. It's what I find fascinating.
Is that, do you think at some level that's part of their great or could be part of their greater strategy to acquire talent that slips through the cracks of their talent funnel? I'm
Yeah,
just
well,
thinking of
yeah,
like the person that, yeah, so is that part of their strategy to acquire talent that's outside
absolutely.
of their
You mean
talent
for the big
funnel?
firms?
Yeah, because I'm thinking that giant firm acquiring that
Yeah.
boutique, now those people they're representing their brand, they're stewarding their own community of relationships to get clients. And the question is, how are they integrating them? And that's where you come in.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, look, it is a strategy. It happens all the time for a couple of reasons. It is faster and more efficient to acquire new capabilities that are already proven than it is to build them from scratch. So you and I have built a better mousetrap. We have built the foremost technology in, I don't know, let's pick a space. Let's just pick government procurement, veterinary product mapping, or some sort of supply chain, something or other in a niche industry. Well, there's potential there, and our firm has a supply chain practice, but does not have one that serves the veterinary industry. Turns out that after COVID, people bought a lot of pets, so the veterinary industry has really grown. So there's a need, or an opportunity for our company to expand our supply chain business into the veterinary industry. I'm making this up, obviously, or maybe I'm not. And so Jay and Juan's veterinary supply chain practice is a really interesting asset. And I could try to teach my people veterinary supply chain, or I could just buy the firm that does this stuff already. So that's benefit number one. Benefit number two, especially if you're a really big firm, is in professional services turnover has historically, it's slowed a little bit, historically run about 20% a year. 20% of people voluntarily quit their firms every year. So you get, if you're staying stable, you probably need to hire that 20% back.
Yeah.
And if you're going to grow, because most firms work on an hours billed basis, you're going to need more people billing more time at a higher rate to continue to grow. So the larger firms and the mid-sized firms are constantly recruiting at different levels. That you recruit at the middle and lower levels when you have to do more delivery. You recruit at the more senior levels when you have a business development priority. These firms are constantly growing and changing, and they often look to acquisition as a way to make that happen. Now, the last thing I'll say about that is historically it was difficult for partnerships to do this, some of the smaller ones, because it's expensive. So you and I are two of the 20 partners in our firm. We want to buy a $20 million firm. That sounds like we each got to pony up $1 million. Like, okay, I might have $1 million, but what if I don't want to? What if I am thinking about retiring because I'm a partner? I'm a more senior person. I don't want to spend $1 million. We don't buy that firm. Somebody else gets a veterinary supply chain practice. Private equity.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to use somebody else's money to buy that veterinary supply chain business. And so it sort of comes full circle, whether it's private equity or M&A activity, there's just a lot of fluidity in the talent market for professional services right now. And
Mm.
the thing about people is they can work anywhere really. I can work for your firm, I can work for his firm, I can work for her firm, I can start my own firm. The expertise is portable.
What, what are, would you say, even anecdotally, some of the values of a professional?
As in like a consultant.
Yeah, like, because it's you have a breadth of experience building relationships with clients, working with some of these massive firms and growing out the market shares in those. Like, what makes a competent, in your estimation, consultant, advisor?
Okay. So I'd say a few things about that. I mean, one is curiosity. Uh, I mean, the best consultants are problem solvers. They want to solve a problem. They want to solve a difficult problem. So that's like people who do, I don't know, whatever if you're into Sudoku or jigsaw puzzles or, whatever, people who are intellectually curious and want to solve problems is really very important. People have mental agility who are able to solve different kinds of problems and learn in different ways. So solving the same problem over and over again is fine. The really great people find interest and excitement solving different types of problems, applying different skill sets, constantly learning and figuring out how to solve a problem. Second thing, and I mentioned this earlier, is they ask really good questions. So the best consultants that I've worked with are really keen to define the problem they're trying to solve and understand it before they try to solve it. The lesser consultants give you an answer before they fully understand the question.
What are some things that can be done to hone that skill? Or is that a skill? How do you even define that?
I think it's more of a trait. I mean, you can make it a skill. I mean, you can make it a skill. I know when I was a young consultant, I had little post-it notes that said, ask another question. I mean, so when you're
Wow.
learning the trade, and you're trying to prove yourself, you got to realize, consultants are, I think by personality tryhards, right? Like, yeah, I want to show you how much I know. Well, no, roll it back, pal. Roll it back. Understand the problem. Ask another question. What's the other, what else would you want to know to do a better job solving this? So there's some habits that you can build, and again, a lot of it is it's best if you're genuinely inquisitive. If you can't be genuinely inquisitive, at least build the habit of asking the question, because the trap that many advisors fall into, and this is where consulting goes the wrong direction, is they chase the dollar harder than they chase the solution. And so what happens is a client calls you up or a prospect calls you up, says, "Hey, I need a blank. I was a rewards consultant for many years. I used to design compensation programs. So you might meet someone or be introduced and they say, you know what? I need a new incentive program. Okay, so there are two ways to go there. I could say, well, yeah, I've designed about 150 of these. So yeah, sure, I'd be happy to design a new incentive program. Let's talk about what the program looks like. Sounds good, right? Well, the better question is why? Why do you need to design a new incentive program? Well, I've got tremendous turnover in my sales force and they all leave to go make more money. They say there's something wrong with our commission plan. And so the problem I have is obviously the compensation program because that's what people complain about. Okay, so the problem you actually are trying to solve for here is it turnover or is it performance? Are the people that quit, how well are they performing? Are they hitting their numbers? Well, yeah. but I think they could do more. Yeah, but so they're hitting their numbers and they're leaving for more money. Okay, doesn't it make sense that someone who's hitting their numbers is not going to leave for less money? Okay, so what I'm getting to here is let's understand the root cause of turnover. If your problem is turnover, if you're losing good salespeople, it could be the compensation program. You might want to make a change to it, but I wouldn't start tinkering with it until I fully understood what the root cause of the turnover was that's causing you to want to make a change. Maybe you're
Mm.
selecting the wrong people. Maybe their targets are too high. Maybe, maybe actually I've had this happen. We had an organization where their territory mapping was poor. So they had some really good sales representatives, but like, you know what? I spend 6 hours in a car to go on a 30-minute sales call. Then I got to go to another town so I can get up the next morning. And they're like, this is wearing me out. And so they changed jobs. And the issue there was actually the way their territories were assigned. It wasn't even how they were paid, but the good people were leaving because of something else. It'd be very easy to come and say, okay, well, Jay, you want a new commission program? Here you go. I've done this 100 times, right? So the better consultant, in my experience, asks questions, and it's not just asking questions for questions' sake, but really understanding what the problem is you're trying to solve, what the root causes are, and then you can address the root causes. Again, back to the medical analogy, you show up at my the doctor's office and say, doc, I've had this headache for weeks. I can't seem to get rid of it. Like, okay, well, I could say, the old, take two aspirin and call me in the morning, or I could say, well, let's understand. So when did it start? Have you had any falls recently? Is there a history of, A, B, or C? Did you play contact sports as a kid? Maybe we should, maybe we should, do a couple of tests. Maybe we should have an MRI. You know what? That's how you, I mean, not that I'm saving lives, but that's how you save lives. You understand the problem before just assuming that, well, he's got a headache, so this aspirin should take care of it.
Mm. What are some misnomers around compensation?
Some misnomers around compensation.
Like, yeah, in your breadth of experience, you found there maybe like there, yeah, misnomers like you think one thing about compensation, but it's actually this that works better than that. Like people tend to do, one thing thinking it'll work and it's something else.
Okay, I got you. I got you. Well, I mean, I say the first thing is, the role of money. Some people think money is everything. Some people think money doesn't matter. Turns out it's both, right? So just paying someone more money is not necessarily going to guarantee that they perform, and it's not going to guarantee that they don't quit. Just because you're paying them a lot of money I mean, that's one factor. Also, just having meaningful. So let's think about why people perform well and why they stay with organizations. Meaningful work, good relationships with colleagues, feeling supported, work-life balance, all those sorts of things, and money. Now, here's the thing: money is the classic compensation. Let's think about it as rewards. So comp, benefits, etc., is a classic dissatisfier. So it's what an organizational psychologist would call a hygiene factor, right? So when you have it and it's working, you don't think about it. Nobody walks into the office every day and says, "Hey, you know what? I love my dental plan," or "My God, am I well paid? I'm so happy." But if it goes wrong, if it goes that below that line, it's a hygiene factor. It starts to become dissatisfier. Like, I don't know too many people quit over the dental plan, but I know a lot of people complain about it. It's like, oh, I've got 3 kids. They've got braces now. It's costing me a fortune because the deductible is too high. And suddenly you've got a dissatisfier. Or, I love where I work. I love my colleagues, but I'm not making enough money compared to what my colleagues are, compared to what other people in other organizations are, and so I'll take a call from a search firm because money becomes a dissatisfier. So I'd say the biggest, use your term, misnomer, misunderstanding about compensation is where it fits into that relationship between an employee and their employer. It is a factor. It's a very important factor. Rewards matter, metrics matter, but a lot of other things matter as well.
Mm.
Converse to that is everything else can be great, and if the money doesn't work in the society in which we live, people are going to need to make a change. If they can't make enough money to meet the needs that they have, most people will seek a different job. It may break their heart to leave the company, but when you talk to people who leave jobs that they love, it's usually because an extraneous factor, often having to do with taking care of their needs outside of work.
Why do people hire and partner with Kinavic?
Well, there are a couple of reasons for that, right? So one is our industry expertise. And that is we are exceptionally deep and completely devoted to serving professional services firms. So, and which is a weird thing. Being a consultant, most people don't do that. It's difficult. Consulting firms are difficult clients. CPA firms are difficult clients because they have clients too. So they hold you to even higher standards, right? They're on the other side of the table now. They're like, okay, I know how this works, so I'm going to expect flawless delivery, which we have. I mean, people hire us because we're industry experts. People hire us because we have proprietary intellectual property in our Verity competency model that's built on 18,000 cases of high performing partners in professional services. So we're specialists. Long way of saying people hire us because we're specialists. People hire us because we have unique IP, and people hire us because we have very experienced practitioners. Our firm is a senior practitioner firm. If you're going to consult to partners in a consulting firm, you need to be their peer. They're not going to take advice from someone who knows less than they do. So again, it's industry expertise, proprietary IP, the experience of our team. And the last thing I would say is they hire us because we're outcome oriented. We're not process oriented. You don't just hire us to do a thing. You hire us because you want your partners to perform better faster. That's what I get excited about is what we call performance acceleration or reducing time to traction. We help partners perform better. That's essentially the tagline, the pitch. That's why you would hire us.
Last question. What do you love about your work?
Well, it's a lot of what I said before. I love the problem solving part of it, to be honest with you. I love working with clients who have something important to address, and I don't love their struggle, but I love helping them do better than they thought they could. I love being able to work with really, really smart, challenging clients who, through working with us, we develop a relationship, a level of trust, and we're able to help them solve their hardest problems. And people say, well, why don't they, if they're such good consultants, why don't they solve their own problems? Well, it's like being your own dentist. Yeah, you can be really good at it, but it doesn't work the same way when
Uh,
you're putting the
it's
tools in
like a
your mouth.
priest without God.
Yeah.
Juan Pablo Gonzalez, this has been an absolute joy learning from you today. I have so many more questions. I'd love to have you back. You're always welcome. If you're listening to this show, where can people connect with you the fastest? They want to either work with you directly, your organization, get to know you, follow you. What's the fastest way they can connect with you?
Yeah, well, my parents blessed me with a very common name, so finding Juan Gonzalez on Google is difficult. But the easiest way to find us and find me is on www.kinavic, which is KINAVIC.com. We're the only Kinavic on the internet. So if you go to Kinavic, you'll see who we are. You'll see a picture of me and my colleagues, and you can connect directly to us through that.
If you're listening to this episode, I challenge you to do so. Please leave us a review on the Culture Matters podcast. Listen to this at least 2 or 3 times, and we will see you next time on the Culture Matters podcast. Thank you, my friend.
Jay, thanks so much for having me. This has been a blast.